Your teen years are more likely than not when you are going to start to challenge your faith and the faith of your parents and the faith that you've been raised up in. So let's talk about like what to do when you are questioning your faith, especially in that teenager to like growing up, young adulthood, and you've got to start making decisions for you, your faith, and what you believe. So let's talk about if you're kind of having this crisis of faith and you're just like not sure what's going on. These tips are going to help you really sort out that question of, you know, what do I believe and what kind of faith do I want to practice moving forward in my life? Very first and foremost, one thing I want to like you to get across in like 2 seconds is that questions are totally okay. Questioning your faith, thinking about God and religion and faith and what you want to do with your life, that is totally normal. These are things that you should be thinking about, and it is not wrong or show a lack of faith or a lack of commitment on your part to have questions. I have questions all the time about my faith and my religion, and you know what? It usually leads me to a greater discovery in my faith. At first, it might lead me to a little bit of like, kind of that prickling, I would describe it, of just like, ooh, I've never heard that. Oh, really? Oh, okay, you know? And so it's okay if you've heard something new that maybe you didn't know before. If you like aren't really understanding some of the concepts of your religion, it is totally okay to have questions. And I hope you know that. The next thing that I would have you do, like besides, so that's kind of tip one, is just like, I want you to know it's totally okay to have questions. And you shouldn't feel bad that you have questions. And you should feel like you have a place to ask those questions, whether that's mom and dad, a pastor, a leader, you know, a young women's advisor, somebody that you can go to that you feel like, hey, yeah, I can have these questions. I want you to feel empowered to do that because you know what? Religion is based on asking questions of who we are and where are we going and what do we want in our lives and what's God's plan for us. Those are all questions, and don't feel bad if you have questions about your faith. Then, as you continue, you know, to wrestle with your faith and these questions that you do have, I want you to cling to what you know. A lot of individuals that I coach, you know, we touch on faith a little bit because it's such a big part of your life. And so often people share and discuss with me what is going wrong with their faith and what they feel like is lacking or they don't understand or some of those questions. And I think it's really important to not only have those and know what they are, but to know what's really going great in your faith and to cling to what you know and to cling to the elements of your testimony that are really rock solid. I know that for me, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sometimes church history could really like throw me through a loop and I'd hear something that I'd never heard before. And while I wrestled and tried to figure out more like documented, certified, you know, church approved, like, you know, how do I answer this question or why did this happen? I would cling to what I do know. And that would be like, well, I do know that God loves me. And I do know that I have felt really great at church. And I felt really great with the direction of my life. And I know that the scriptures are true, right? So cling to what you know, because so often when we have questions, we kind of like forget about what we do know about the gospel of Jesus Christ and what we do know about our faith because we can get a little bit consumed with our questions. So I just want you to always remember and think to yourself, like, what do I know? What do I have a testimony of? And what do I believe? Next, I think it's so important to pray for help. The scriptures talk again and again and again about how the adversary and how the devil, he wants to cut off that line of communication. He wants us to stop praying because prayer invites so many miracles into our lives, invites the Spirit into our life. And when we stop praying, we're cutting off the channel that we can receive a lot of answers to our questions from. So I know that it might feel weird, especially if you're doubting, like, is God there? And does he know me? Does he love me? You know, all those things. It can feel really weird to pray, but I would encourage you to continue to pray because that's one of the main modes that your answers are going to come through, is your personal revelation. Whether that's, hey, I didn't get an answer to this, but now it doesn't bug me as bad. Or, hey, I really felt like this is what God was trying to tell me about, that question that I have. So keep praying. Again, I think of some of the individuals that I've coached, and they said, well, I just stopped praying because I felt like I stopped getting answers. And to me, that's like saying, well, I just stopped working because I wasn't getting results. And it's kind of like, well, okay, you weren't getting answers before, but now you're really not going to get answers. I can 1000% guarantee you that if you aren't praying and asking for these answers and searching for them and looking for them, you're not going to find them, right? So while we're in this search and while we're figuring out our faith, let's keep asking for help from God. Let's keep praying, and maybe that prayer is really different than your prayers used to be, and that's okay. But I'd encourage you to keep that line of communication open, because maybe the answers aren't coming yet, but the moment we stop, they're more than likely not going to come because we're not doing anything to get those answers. Don't stop the good things that you are doing. A lot of teens that I talk to that are questioning their faith and losing their faith, they're like, well, I had a question about this. It didn't sit right with me, so I just stopped going to church. I just stopped going to seminary. I don't pray. I don't read my scripture. I just stopped because I didn't know the answers to those questions. And an example I like to use is if we are struggling with the subject of English, right? And it's not really making sense to us, or maybe there's one part of it that's really hard for us to grasp and we don't understand why it's important and why it matters and why you need to know all the differences and spelling and variation and use and what's a noun and a pronoun, blah, blah, blah. If you just stopped going to English class, you're not going to get any answers. You're not going to get any better, and you're not going to have any further enlightenment of English. You're still going to fail that class. And so it's actually really similar to religion. We just need to treat it like something else. Maybe it's not working for us right now, or maybe there's a part of it, or maybe we're just not sure how all these pieces fit together with us and our faith and our life. If we just stop, it's not going to get any better. It's just going to stop our progress right there, and we're not going to learn and progress. And so just like any other subject that you've been struggling with, I'd encourage you to give it some serious study, to give it some tutoring, to give it some of your serious time and attention, because you don't want to cut off that progress that you're making and stopping the good things that are working for you. And I would lean so hard into what's working for you. So maybe you have a hard time with your church history or one principle of the gospel, right? I would lean crazy hard into what you know. I would lean crazy hard into well, I feel really good when I do this. I really love going to church, I would just lean into what you do know, and don't give up on the good things just because we have questions on some other things. This one is huge, and it's to reflect on your own spiritual experiences. When I was in high school, I actually started this practice that changed my life. And it was that I had a regular journal and I had a spiritual experience journal. And so whenever I felt the hand of God in my life, whenever I felt particularly blessed or got an answer to my prayers, or was even struggling, I wrote that down in this one specific journal. And it is a treasure to me. Because one, we think we're always going to remember, and we don't remember. So it's so important to remember those experiences, but it also helps me see and understand my personal relationship to God. Because a lot of times we can feel like we don't have a relationship with God. And so I would encourage you to start to keep record and track of those spiritual experiences that you've had in your life. If you've had some really big ones in the past, I'd make sure that those are documented. I think back on those. I would think back to when did I feel like my spirituality was its best? What was I doing? And what is my personal relationship with God? And as I like flip through this journal that I have, and now I feel like my journal is combined. I'll just write my spiritual experiences and my daily experiences in one journal. So whatever works for you. But specifically when I think back to that journal I had in high school that had my spiritual experiences then, you know, if I ever had like a, oh man, I'm not feeling answers to my prayers. Like, does God love me? Man, somebody brought up a question to me and I don't know an answer to that, you know, I could look back at this journal and say, you know what? I still don't know the answer to this question that I have. And doesn't seem like anybody has an answer. But I know that the gospel is true because look at, God answered my prayers here. He helped me out here. I got an answer to this question at this time in my life. So I can't deny those experiences because they're real and they happened to me. And so maybe this is a question I have to put on the shelf. Guess what? I have questions that are on the shelf. And when I get to heaven, like, I don't know, I want like a little like group of people and I want to have like a pen and paper and I just want to say, hey, why was this like it was? When did this happen? Why did you do that? Why was it like this? Why are men and women so different, right? Like, I have so many questions and that's okay. And when I can't answer a question right now, I put it on the shelf. And some of those items have come off the shelf and I got an answer later in my life. I got an answer after 6 months of serious study and prayer and reading textbooks and literature and church literature on a topic. And some of those are still on the shelf. And I would imagine that they'll probably be on the shelf until I get that little note session in heaven when I get to ask some of those questions. So when you can reflect on your own spiritual experiences, it helps you realize that, hey, God has helped me with some questions I've had in the past. He's helped me with some experiences. And so just because I'm not getting an answer now doesn't mean that he doesn't love me and he's not there and he doesn't hear me. I just am experiencing something new. This tip, and this tip like is hard, but I hope you know that no or no answer might be your answer. Like I talked about, I have like a shelf in my mind where I put gospel questions. I put questions that some really bother me. Like, if I'm being really real, like I've got questions that if I want to, I could let really, rattle my testimony. And I put those on the shelf for lots of reasons. I put those on the shelf because I trust God, I trust his goodness, and I trust the answers will come whenever he chooses to reveal them. But I also put questions on the shelf because these are questions that don't affect my day-to-day living and daily life and belief in Jesus Christ. But if I wanted to just focus on those solely, day in, day out, man, it would take from my happiness. Man, it would take away from my faith experiences that I do have because they would feel really tainted. And so I hope that when you don't get an answer, when you get a no, when you thought you should get a yes, or when something's a little bit different than you thought it was, that you can really assess, reflect on your own spirituality, reflect on your personal revelation, and put questions up on the shelf as you have them. And throughout your life, they'll come off. One of my favorite examples of this is from Brother Michael Wilcox. He talked about that his dad left him. He left his mom and his siblings when they were all really young. And he prayed at 15 to know God, why did my dad leave? And I just don't understand it. And it still hurts my heart. And he didn't get any answers. And I feel like that's a big question to ask. And that's a big hey, God, I think you owe me some answers on that one, right? And so he didn't get any answers. And so then he just kept on living his life. And at 20, he asked the same prayer of hey, please help me understand. Why did my dad leave? And and like, please help me like to be okay with this, to be at peace with this. And he didn't get an answer. And then he's like in his 40s, and he has his own family. He really hasn't thought about his dad. Like, his dad's just not part of his life, right? And one day he says that his little boys, he had these 2 little boys, and they ran in and they just gave him this big hug, and they were like, Dad, I love you so much. And like, he just had this amazing moment with his little boys. And that's when God chose to answer his prayers. And he said that he heard like this voice in his head that said, do you feel worse for the son that lost their dad or the dad that lost their sons? And he said he just cried. He just sobbed his eyes out because he finally could be at peace and got his answer from God on like, how can I be at peace with my dad leaving me as a little boy? Because now he understood what it was like to be a father. Now he understood and actually had a place in his heart for that answer. Had God given him that answer at 15? At 15, he didn't know what it was like to be a dad. He didn't know what it was like to have 2 little boys, right? He didn't have that place in his heart to hold that answer. And so I think about that all the time, that I probably have questions and things that I'm waiting for God to answer to me. But right now, there's not a place in my heart for that answer. And even though I might think that there is a place, God is waiting for me to experience something. God is waiting for something to be revealed, something for me to do, something for me to learn or listen or experience in life before he can give me those answers. And so if that's you, if you feel like God's not answering your prayers, or if he's just like, kind of sounds like heaven is closed, I hope you can understand that maybe there's a lesson in this, and maybe God is just waiting for there to be a holding place in your own heart for the answer. Okay, so I gave you some tips on this and some suggestions, but I totally understand that questioning your faith and just having questions and like just not sure how you want to proceed with your life and your faith and your religion is massive. It's not something that can be fixed in a YouTube video. It's not something that like you can just try a couple steps and it like will magically get better. So I hope that these have inspired you, have prickled your heart, have made you feel like maybe I'll try this. But I want you to know that your journey isn't over and that you've got this. And I hope if anything, you cling to like what you know. And one thing I know is the goodness of God, and that he loves his children, and that there is help for you no matter where you are on this journey. So I love you. If you're going through a faith crisis, like please leave a comment down below. Like I'd love to, if I see it, love you, support you, give you any like tips or suggestions that I have. But I just genuinely know that, God is good, and that you will go on the journey that you need to go on to, and it's okay to have questions. I've got questions that are on the shelf, and sometimes when I'm coaching people and they tell me their questions that they're having about their faith, some of those I'm like, oh, why would you question that? That doesn't bother me, right? There's other times where people share questions and I'm like, yeah, whoa, never thought about that, right? And I have to put it up on the shelf. So it's okay if people don't understand your questions. It's okay if maybe people are telling you get over it. Just not worry about it. You got to go on your own journey and receive your own personal revelation. And so I just want you to be in a good spot to do that for your life. And I hope that these tips help you do that. So sending you so much love, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. So Abby J out.